today's budget work session. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming and doing the hard work you're doing on the budget. We really appreciate it. So I don't have a whole lot of introductory remarks. We're just going to move straight to Dr. Walls.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lateef and members of the board. Before we begin this evening, and you have an agenda in front of you, so I won't go through that, but we have a few updates to give you, and I just wanted to mention, as I stated last night, that once you see the revenue update from Mr. Wallingford, it will show you that we have a little gap there to close, and we also have some other interests. And as we do each and every year at markup, we will bring some changes to have a balanced budget. And sometimes we take a few things out and sometimes we add a few things in. But we will do that at markup, and then it will be up to the board to make those decisions. That being said, there are several things that have come before the board, and I just wanted to give you a brief update, no slides, on where we are with just a few of these items. So one of the things that our staff is doing is exploring and is continuing to explore as we are in the design phase. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves because we have to have an approved budget, but in terms of looking at Garfield and Woodbridge, so we are looking at the ability to have 2 additional gyms in the new structure, giving them a total of 3 gymnasiums. So we are exploring that. We were exploring that before last night, so I just want you to know that. The elementary PE staffing, as I mentioned last night, I'm putting an item on the school board agenda asking your support for having an exploratory committee to listen to what I believe are, at least to some degree, some legitimate concerns by some of the physical education teachers. I mentioned the fact that we have a lot of competing needs, but I think theirs is an important one, so we will be taking a look at that and reporting back to you as well on that. We will also be looking at those remaining high schools that do not have an artificial turf field. It's my understanding that even the one high school that's the national championship might be interested in a practice field that's turf, so we are still exploring at least getting a timeline for those. You may recall we did several strings rooms over the course of the last several years, and even though we didn't have them plugged into an exact year, the first year that we placed them in the CIP, we at least listed them in there and the board voted on them. So that's what we're looking at there. And then finally, the Occoquan Elementary, we've been exploring that for a couple of years, and in this year's CIP, we were able to move that up 2 years. There's a lot of ramifications with building the replacement school. We need some access to certain areas. We have a couple of homes we may need to take a look at. We can't talk about that too much in the public setting, but we have some access and egress that we need to look at with that. We'd also need to look at where those trailers could go. So the good news tonight is 3 of the 7 trailers will be leaving next year. And we have relooked at that timeline, and we believe that we can move it up 1 additional year. So that would be 3 years in addition. So again, as I mentioned when I shared the budget, we have tried to listen to each and every board member over the last, I would say, more than 1 year, and tried to do as much as we could in this budget. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Wallingford for the revenue update.
Good evening. So, I keep having to follow Dr. Waltz, and I'm beginning to find it a tough act to follow, but final budget changes for the General Assembly. You can see up here the first 2 columns of the House and Senate. We briefly talked about those at the first work session, and I've left there on the slide just for reference purpose. The third column, the column all the way to the right, February 27th, our last work session day, was the day that was approved. And what you can see there are changes. Basic aid being reduced by about $1.8, $1.9 million. Our compensation supplement is reduced by about $1.2 million. The committee came out with a almost $500,000 reduction to the VPI supplement that we were going to receive. And then we have other changes to revenue, small technical changes that get us an additional reduction of about $15,000. And you can see that we are reducing, we're going to receive, relative to the governor's introduced budget, we're going to receive about $3.6 million less than we had planned. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on the revenue update, if you want to do them now? Okay. Let's move to Mr. Klein, trailer reduction plan. Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Chairman Lateef, members of the board, Dr. Waltz, we'd like to provide an update and, in fact, look at potentially obtaining some direction from the board regarding the plan to reduce portable classrooms. If you'll recall, through the past year, both the school board and the Board of County Supervisors passed resolutions for the school board to come up with a plan to reduce and/or eliminate trailers. And in our work session back in January, we provided you with that information. The chart in front of you highlights the elements that were within that CIP, amounting to about $174 million that would move us into the direction that, in theory, certainly we can reduce the number of trailers. Ideally, the goal was to try and get to a point that we sort of would say that, other than in particular spots that would be of a more localized and very short-term period, that we would be able to eliminate trailers. We have put in the CIP, we identified these items in the list, and in the handouts that we gave you and you should have in front of you are two versions of the CIP. They look like the new, okay, got them? So the idea of this is that it's providing you with basically two versions of the CIP, one that shows in red the trailer elimination or trailer reduction elements built into the CIP, and the second one shows you a version of the CIP without those elements built into them. And the primary concern and discussion is that certainly in discussion, in particular with a couple of supervisors, they have made the assumption that the version with the red in there is that the school board has taken this on and the school board is fully funding it. Well, exactly.
No comment.
So I'll move forward. So in the context of publishing the CIP, I think what we would recommend as we move forward was to shift to the version without the trailer reduction elements in it, show, like, for example, this slide as a separate element, with the idea that we would be entering into discussion negotiation with the Board of Supervisors about the whole discussion of trailer reduction and elimination, and sort of how and when would it get paid for.
Do you mind taking a question right now? Is that okay?
No, that's fine.
Ms. Williams?
Not really a question, but in consideration and along those lines, maybe it might do us good to remind them of the promise that was made between the two boards to share in that responsibility, and then also just for our board to know that I've asked for the joint CIP meeting information to be updated to us on a regular basis after we meet, because I think that's also part of the problem. Both boards, I don't think, are getting updated with the information that comes out of that committee, because it was decided
Okay.
it should be a shared responsibility.
Correct, and we'd just like to highlight that this would remind them, if you will, that yes, we have met the obligation to come up with what are those elements necessary to sort of achieve that result. But at the same time, it was not intended to go forward the school board was now fully funding this over the next 10 years. The other element is just a reminder that for FY20 going forward, there are no actual budget costs in FY20. So within the context of the grand CIP, there is still time to discuss this. This is not an element that says, okay, a decision about how to fund it is not something that has to be done immediately. It is something that can continue to be discussed with potentially a joint committee or with the joint boards to come to a resolution, more likely for something to be defined as we go into next year's CIP. And then just a couple reminders that there are other, in addition to the, we show the CIP, certainly there are other elements of the CIP that get impacted by it. Our operating costs, in general, the operating costs are already there because the students are in the trailers. So we're really focusing primarily on the issues of new construction of space. And then to some extent, the energy costs become sort of a wash between less efficient trailers as opposed to a more efficient but larger building. This highlights just, we provided these slides earlier in the discussion. It just highlights the differences in our debt percentage as part of our budget, with and without the elimination of port trailers, and the same thing from a different perspective. And then also is just trying to remind people of certain assumptions that are in there. One is obviously boundaries have an impact on the actual utilization in the end. We're also subject to how our future population impacts it relative to things like special needs, percentage of free and reduced lunch, and the assumption that instructional programs at this point are basically remaining the same. The other component that we'll have to remind them is, as we identified earlier, that this past fall we had an increase of about 342 students in student enrollment, but the impact because of the programs and the programmatic impact was actually the effect of about 1,000 students. So that's hard to predict going forward, but simply just saying we've paid for a classroom, it eliminates a trailer. In enrollment is only one of the pieces of the puzzle. The programmatic impacts are also a piece of the puzzle. So, yes, ma'am.
I just want to know, if you're removing trailers, what will that look like? How many? Thank you, I'm sorry. What will it look like within each magisterial district if you're going that way? If not, how will it look?
The materials that we provided you in your workbook for the CIP break that down by our planning districts and by our schools. I don't know that I have it specifically by magisterial district, but it should show it sort of how the impacts are at the school level. The issue here, in a sense, is the 174 million translates to about between 100 and 125 reduction of 100 to 125 trailers around the district, keeping in mind that also factors in, we're still growing. So it's not just a snapshot of where we are today, it's a look at where we are today, our needs for today, and how those needs are changing over the next 10 years.
Well, let me just say this and then I'll let you go. The community doesn't understand it. If they see trailers, they see trailers. And you cannot go around and tell them, well, the reduction, because they're not buying that. So is there anything, I don't care if you put up signs and wave them on at the corner, somebody needs to let them know exactly how that relates to their district and their schools. I know I feel good about mine, so leave it alone. Yes, okay. And so we can do something. We need to be able to tell them something that's positive.
Okay. We'll
So
take that,
I'll
take that
look
into
forward.
consideration to look essentially at how we might better communicate
Yeah.
to, and I would agree probably the individual schools as to where they are on trailers today and what the potential impacts are
Because
going
it's
forward and
always
what that
been-
reduction might mean to
Yeah.
them.
Okay, well, thank you, that's it.
Mr. Klein, can you go back a few slides to the debt, the line graph for the debt? It would have been 3 or 4 slides back with the green and yellow line. And the question would be is, and I don't know the answer to this, but and you showed it, our debt capacity, is that how much of an effect will the CIP, joint CIP, the trailer reduction plan affect our debt capacity? And does that put us in any jeopardy or?
Well, this is the one you wanted, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So the issue here is certainly our biggest concern is in 2023. Now, at this point, the trailer reduction plan is only impacting at 0.06% of the total debt. But that's our peak point. Because so much of the construction and the projects are in the last 5 years of the 10-year plan, the yellow line shows the growth in debt over the blue line, which would be without the trailer plan. The other element I would highlight is that traditionally we see a curve like this. The expectation generally is, while it shows sort of a hill and we come down the other side, that curve tends to move to the right as we continue to grow and continue to update the CIPs. We've never seen it turn and come back down again.
So to be clear, what you're telling me is, say 2024 happens, we're downhill on the curve, we might come up with 5 other projects that push us back up the curve.
Correct. If there are other projects that were not in the original proposed CIP that
Yeah.
require the use of debt, those numbers will go up.
Okay, thank you. Justin?
Yeah, just
Mr. Wilk.
it's fine. Back in, just a quick thing about the trailer and kind of going off with what Ms. Ralston was saying. Can we get something from you guys, not obviously immediately, but my understanding, there are some schools that for particular reasons, site-based decisions, that they might want to keep one of the modular classrooms or learning cottages or trailers for a decision that they maybe want to put someone out there, or that they want to use it as additional storage and stuff like that. Do these, from my understanding, I can think of one on top of my head, but is this a common practice that we allow schools to do with them if they have the capacity in the building, but for whatever reason they can be used for their, yeah.
So every year, we have a process that involves the principals and the level associates. It ends up also involving the deputy and then the appropriate associates over facilities and so forth. And we look at each and every school. We get an updated feedback from each principal on what their needs may or may not be. And we ask them to we don't call it this, but instead of a long explanation, we expect them to do sort of a space audit in their building. Like when you add a trailer to a school, there's expense. You have to lay asphalt, walkways. You have to have handicapped access. You have to hook up water to some of them. You have to hook up electric to all of them. So there's a lot that goes in. It's an expensive undertaking. So we try to very, very carefully look and manage that every single year, and then I'll put it a different way. If you ask most principals, would you like a trailer for whatever use you'd like? Most of them would say yes. So when you want to take a trailer away, they're not always too eager to do that. Some are. But we look at that very carefully, and that kind of a collaborative effort between the school and those of us in central office, and then it eventually gets folded into the division's plan for the following year and comes to the superintendent's staff ultimately for approval. So again, we weigh the needs. Now, I'm not saying we would never use a trailer for storage, because quite frankly, we have some schools where at the time they were built, there was very little, storage space created. So sometimes we allow something at one school and we may not allow it at another. It may be, well, you need to clean out the storage space that you have. Does that answer your question?
If I could add one minor point to that, and that is, in the context of the discussions with the Board of County Supervisors, part of that will need to be clarified. Because if they have an expectation that says they will fund some significant portion of the 174 million. If their expectation is every single trailer disappears, that's probably not a realistic
That's what I was saying, I mean, because.
expectation, but-
Capacity, I'm thinking, but you were saying space, older building, not the same time period it was built, that I can see being used, for that reason, but it's not really a trailer in the sense that we're putting kids out there.
Right.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
I don't, even at the joint meeting, I talked to the name trailer reduction plan. I mean, I want everyone to be clear on this and make sure I understand this. This amount of money is to build 2 new elementary schools. Is that correct? Additions to another elementary and additions to a middle. So yes, I understand it'll help with overcrowded buildings, which Ms. Williams brought up yesterday very nicely. But this plan also, I mean, it gives us money for schools. Is that correct? I mean, it's not just a trailer reduction plan. I understand the goal of it is to reduce trailers, but we're also building schools with this money.
Correct.
Right. I mean, it's not just, people shouldn't think of it as just straight up trailer
I mean,
reduction. We're building full facilities.
Potentially, the real viewpoint is, it is our goal to have every student in permanent space.
Yes.
That's where they should be educated.
Okay.
And while we're talking about reducing portable classrooms, et
Yeah.
cetera, the reality is, to do that, we have to construct additional buildings,
Yes,
move the
to
students into
reduce
those
overcrowded
facilities,
buildings,
and
right.
that's really where we should be serving the
Yep.
students.
Excellent. Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Klein? Okay. I guess we'll move to the discussion and question sections of this work session, and we can go around the room. Anybody wants to start first with their list? Allison, any questions for, well, anybody can ask. This is the time we're opening up questions on the work session. Before, as people think of their questions, I want to commend Dr. Waltz and the staff for addressing, the fact, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that it's been a long time since we've had a budget this good. It's been a long time since coming out of this great recession, the country saw the growth, but we didn't see that growth sort of result in the kinds of funds we need to catch up with where we need to be here in the county. So there are enormous competing interests, and there are a lot of folks and a lot of programs and a lot of things I think we wish we could do more for, but I think this is an excellent start to that, and I can't thank you guys enough for, after looking at the $7 million reduction we're getting from the state, of continuing to work to find out ways where we can deal with that decrease, unanticipated decrease in the General Assembly budget. So I want to thank you all for the work you do, and everyone in this room. This is a moving target that is changing in some aspects hourly, and I think hearing about your desire to address the PE teachers' concerns last night was excellent, and I think as we move forward, we have this year's budget, and I anticipate hopefully a good budget as well next year to help answer some of these competing interests. So if anybody has any questions, Ms. Ralston.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the bus drivers and the yard people. What do we call them? The yard, I call them the facilities, under facilities. Everybody needs since the budget is so good, is there money in there for them too?
Yes. So
Very good.
those employees, I mean, the short answer is yes. A little bit more detail is they are going to get the largest raise that they have, the largest percentage
Great.
raise in 10 years. The other very nice thing that is, I can just tell you regionally, I know what's going on in the other school divisions in Northern Virginia. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only school division that will not have a health care increase. So that's sort of a double bonus, because whenever the health care costs go up, they have to pay a percentage of that out of their check. So there is no increase in health care, which is just amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilk.
Yeah, and I apologize for not being here the last work session. One thing, and I don't know, Mr. Bigsby, or who this would fall under, I'm looking at the CTE area. and I'm looking at Potomac Middle, and I was under the impression that aquaponics was part of, it was 2 years ago, and was it just a typo that it was left off as because it is an expansion. I'm sorry, sir. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'll be happy to address that. We have, first of all, aquaponics is a CTE area that is expanding exponentially. And we have a group of teachers who are cutting edge over at Potomac Middle School that are doing some things that are literally cutting edge in the United States at the middle school level. They have sort of been operating on a shoestring to get where they were. We are doing a complete redo of that program, and that money we have already identified in this year's budget, and we are moving forward on that rebuild. So it will be over the period of this year and next year, but the money has already been identified.
Okay, yeah, no, and I
Yeah.
appreciate, I was visiting and I got the updates in that, so would it be appropriate to say that there is an aquaponic program then there?
There will be by September.
Okay, so that can, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Satterwhite?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we go back to transportation? Because somebody brought up some questions with me in the community after looking at the transportation budget in the budget book, pages 28 and 29, and I was wondering if we could get some clarification on that. This is in the big budget book. So the question that was posed to me is, it was about the huge increase in money going to transportation. I know we're opening the Western Transportation Facility, but can you walk us through the budget changes and give us some more information on what we're looking for? So on page 28, the upper right-hand column, can you walk us through the budget changes and give us some more information on that and what's going to be happening?
Okay, so I'll try to do that. The top right column, budget changes for fiscal year 2020? Yep. Is that it? Okay,
Yes.
so
Thank you.
we're adding 4 scheduling technicians and 1 recruitment specialist to improve routing, increase new driver recruitment, and improve service. So for our scheduling technicians, typically we may pull bus drivers off of their routes, or if we have a bus driver that's on desk duty, we may use them for scheduling. These new 4 scheduling technicians will be dedicated just only to routing and nothing else. That will be their only responsibility. One of the opportunities for us is to improve our efficiency through improving our routing, and that'll be a big push for us next year. We attempted to do some efficiency things this year, but some we were successful, some created some pushback from parents. So we're going to, I think we'll do a much better job this coming school year. We're already working on routes for next year. We're already putting those routes in a bank, so to speak, so that when we hit the ground in August, end of August, those routes will be set, and they will always need some fine-tuning, but we're very hopeful that the beginning of next year will be much more successful than the beginning of this year. So our recruitment specialist, so we believe that there's some markets out there where we can tap and increase our full-time bus driver numbers. You know, for every maybe 20 applicants, we might generate 5 successful bus drivers from that. The attrition rate is significantly high. You know, once applicants get behind the wheel of that bus, it's a different perspective, especially when you look in that mirror and you look back and you envision 50 children back there. That's like flying a plane without wings. So, so we definitely need to do a better job of recruiting, develop some strategies for recruiting. And again, we have some ideas. Actually, Mr. Mulgrew is, we've had a number of conversations about some markets that we believe we can tap into to increase the number of full-time bus drivers. How many?
Basically, what does that look like? How many?
So we're about, on any given day, probably 60 positions short. So 60 bus drivers. So that's why we have the double runs. That's why if we have some bus drivers out on a sick leave, we're filling in gaps, and it's a challenge, just like almost like a chess match first thing in the morning. It's very interesting. In the county car that I drive, I have a radio that's listens to all the dispatch chatter that's going back and forth, and it is intense. It's amazing the job that they do finding buses to fill those gaps, and it's impressive, the work that they do. So that's the recruitment specialist. We're opening the Western Transportation Center, and not unlike when we open a new high school or middle school, there are some fixed costs associated with that. So that's what we need just as a baseline to open that facility and to be able to function efficiently. That's the third bullet is we're adding 10 positions to improve our dispatch call taking. There's an enormous amount of business first thing in the morning, just absolutely enormous, with buses that are delayed for a multitude of reasons. I could go through a long list of why buses can't make that run or they're diverted. So those dispatchers are critical to the efficiency and being able to fill in the gaps and take advantage of buses that we have in waiting to pick up the slack. So again, in past years we've filled some of those dispatch positions with bus drivers that may be on light duty for whatever reason, health or injury. So these are dedicated and will be interviewed for and dedicated to dispatch only. And that is an art to that. It's like the air traffic controllers. It's what they do is impressive. So we're reducing the number of bus drivers and bus aides. So in previous years, because of the shortage that we have of bus drivers, we, in a typical year, will take some of the money from the bus driver compensation from the salaries, and we find ourselves paying a lot of our bus drivers overtime. We absolutely have to use those bus drivers beyond the 6-hour day to take activity runs, to take an afternoon run. So we're just simply cleaning up our books there to put that money exactly where we use it. Let's see, 12 position titles were reclassified, recommendation from the compensation and classification study. I'm not sure you can speak to that, Dave.
If I could add one component, part of the issue we're dealing with here is the size of the budget in transportation. The transportation budget, while increasing $1.9 million, is roughly a 4% increase. We're giving a raise that's 4.8%. So to the extent that there are large dollars involved, it skews, yes, that's a huge number, but if we're looking at the significance of compensation and the increase in compensation on the number of employees, that's really the driving factor in the total number. Beyond that, there are adjustments in reclassifications, positions, and reprogramming. But the bottom line big number is really growing because of the pay raise.
Stay right there.
Some mornings I get phone calls because the bus hasn't shown up.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult to call anybody else, that early in the morning because you guys are probably busy trying to get to wherever it is you're going. So I don't have an answer to the parents when they do that, when they call and say the bus didn't show up or went by. I've had some where the bus just kind of kept right on driving past the kids. Now, they probably were crowded or
That could be. There's a
I'm
number.
gonna give it the good side.
Right, number of
possibly.
possibilities. So first thing in the morning, when we put those 600 and some buses out on the road, we do get an enormous amount of phone calls into the dispatch center. And honestly, there are some days when we simply cannot take all those calls. We don't have enough, we don't have all the resources, all the staff to do that. We try to communicate, well, we do more than try. We communicate to schools directly when we know that we're going to have a late bus so that they can take the calls, talk to the parents. So they need to call transportation on a typical day. We could take that call.
And
At the beginning of this school year,
It's a lot of 'em.
we couldn't take all those calls.
That's right. That's what I was going to say
Even if I had gone
next.
out there, we couldn't have taken them home.
Okay.
I think something else to remember, and I sometimes have an opportunity, especially when I'm talking with business leaders, to explain to them that the school division is really a conglomerate of many businesses. So our transportation operation is one of the largest in the country. And when you think of on opening day of school, we're supposed to be ready to pick up about 66,000 bus riders. Boom. On opening day, and everything's supposed to go great. We're rolling out 900 buses. And when you think about that kind of a logistical operation, and I did something similar when I had a loaner car for a few days a couple years ago. I had the radio was in the car, and I was just, I had a newfound appreciation for how challenging that is, just to listen to all the issues from there's a tree branch down on such and such and water pooling on someplace else, and the list goes on and on. A 3-car accident, we're not moving, how do I reroute? And after listening to that, I remember coming to Dave after those 3 or 4 days I had that car, and I said to Dave, I want to go out and meet those dispatchers, and I want to have lunch brought in for them, because I do not know how they do that with the patience and professionalism that they have. They stayed calm. I mean, I would have probably, well, I don't want to talk about wrecking a car, but but I'm just saying that I had a newfound respect. And basically, right now in the one center that we did that, I think there were 8 or 9 people in a portable classroom with the phones, just one call after the other for the whole hour and a half that I was there. And they had to eat like 1 or 2 at a time, because there's so much going on. So this is long overdue. Not to mention the fact that in the time I've been here, we've added almost 25,000 students.
Allison?
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, you touched on healthcare and mentioned that we're not going to see any healthcare increases. So I just want to clarify that one more time, because I usually ask this every year too. So are we talking about all of our plans? We're not going to see our employees have to pay more for their healthcare this year?
Correct.
I can't remember that happening.
I don't believe it's happened in any of the other 13 years I was here.
That's amazing. Wow. So our employees are actually going to see that increase on their paychecks then? Healthcare's not eating it this time.
Right.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. Okay, looking through the budget book, I see in the different departments, inflation of 2% on supplies, materials, and equipment being added for the department. Are we doing that for our schools with the school-based budgets? We are. Okay, very good. So that was included then when they were working out their
Yes.
worksheets?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Trenum? Not to put you on the spot, but I think, Mr. Wilk, did you have something?
if he's,
No, let's, yeah, we'll have Mr. Wilk go.
Can you give us what is the typical, do we know, increase of the healthcare that we've experienced? Like you said, this is the first time in a while, but what, do we have a kind of 2 to 3, or what do we?
I want to say we generally budget around 5 or 6%. Correct?
Correct. We've averaged about 5% over time. The national average has been more like, I think, about 8%.
Of increase yearly?
Of increase year after year.
Okay, so that's not happening this year.
And this year, we're fortunate that it's 0.
So I asked questions back on February 21st, which actually were more in line with the reimbursement policy, but since it's in this budget packet, which is fine, and it does have to deal with the budget itself, I've heard a couple times about these vehicles, the pooled cars, the cars that the staff uses and stuff like that. It says there are 6 ones that are in use, first come, first serve. How often is it typically that all 6 are gone in a day? Is that common, not so common, or? Again, just a generality, not.
Sherry knows it.
Sherry knows the answer to that.
She gives out the keys.
I would think we're probably closer to having, on any given day, at least 4 or 5 of them are out. And there are certainly occasions in which all 6 are out, and we have additional people seeking more vehicles, but there are just 6 in the pool.
Okay, because it's one thing I was thinking with this, like, again, the idea that, if a board member socioeconomically needed to, with the mileage or something like that, there would be a possibility they could potentially put so there is the possibility of asking for a car.
Yes.
If they are going to be spending a day of visiting their schools, for example, or going to a school function or something like that.
Well, or if you're going on a trip, let's say Richmond, and you let us know in advance, we'll make sure a car is reserved and gassed up.
Okay, but again, even in district travel or something, if they, for whatever reason, put.
I guess if they were going to travel all day and we had one available.
Okay, that sounds like. Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
I just want to piggyback on your question because I've actually used one of those cars. Depending on where you live, it may not be practical because you have to drive all the way out here during business hours in order to pick the car up. And then you drive back wherever it is you're going. So like say if you're, not close to the Kelly building, it may not be practical. Plus, I'm sure Dr. Welts can testify, they're not the newest and latest, greatest cars. They run. And yes, they run. They're still better than any car I've owned. So no complaints in my department. But I have used one, for example, to go to Williamsburg I think it was the first or second year that I was on the board. But everybody's in the same pool as far as availability to get the cars, just for your reference.
Okay, great, thanks, guys. Mr. Trenum, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things here, trying to slide in fast and furious. First off, thanks for the per pupil allocation sheets. Actually, I do have a question about how those are how those are stacked. So, for instance, I'm going to start with the top one. The per pupil allocation we have for regular elementary, and they've got certain allocations, and we go back here, and then we've got all kinds of them. But then, so for instance, if we have one that says there's the per pupil allocation for, I'll pick this one, economically disadvantaged. It's like for grades K to 5. So the way this work is a school with economically disadvantaged students, would they get like the regular elementary allocation, and then you would layer the economically disadvantaged on top of it for however many economically disadvantaged students they have. And if they have ESOL students, you would layer the ESOL student sheet on top of that. Okay, very good. So make sure I understand how that process works. do have a question. I just flipped them right quick. For Pennington, Porter, and the Nokesville School, how does that work? Do they get like the regular allocation for grades 1 to 3, and then the regular allocation grades 4 to 5, and then they get the middle school allocations? So those are bundled that way? Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I do have a question on the, that's not me, okay, thank you. On the percentage change by step, I know we advertised, we're advertising a 4.8, which is basically a step and a 2% COLA overall. And this is more of a, maybe a philosophical question that I think I've mentioned before, but one thing when we do a COLA is obviously like every pay grade, you've got this delta between the lowest grades and the highest grades, and that, as you go up in steps, that delta gets bigger, but then when you add a COLA, the percentage is based on that, so your COLA is further enlarging that delta. Have we looked at something as far as maybe instead of I'm saying we do it this year, but at least evaluate what the impact would be of going, say, a solid base rate amount, so instead of making this gap get bigger like that, we slide the entire pay scale up by an equivalent amount. Have we done any sort of analysis on what that might look like, or questions on that?
Yeah, I paid for that compensation study. Was that included in there? I thought there was a reference back in there.
I don't remember seeing that. But.
Mr. Klein, Dr. Waltz?
I don't recall that as being, I'll defer to Ms. White, but I don't recall that being a part of the board's direction. That was a board commission study. Now, certainly you can have something like that done. It's, as you know, very expensive. Those 2 studies we did on staffing and compensation was over $500,000. But yes.
I think it might be, actually, that may be a question, is just what would the cost for a $100 across the board pay increase for everybody be? Because I know you've got, it's easy to do the math, number of employees times $100 for the salary, but then you've got the benefits and stuff like that. How hard would it be just to calculate that?
I mean, that's something that we could look at. That might be a great Dave Klein ROP project for next year.
I mean, just like I said, yeah, just like I said, just the cost of $100, said number of times students plus whatever thing, that may be a good way to frame that discussion. So I don't know if you can talk to that now, or if that's.
It would probably be better to talk and clarify. I can think of a half a dozen questions to clarify it before you go run the numbers. Like, are you talking people? Are you talking people or FTE? You're talking $100 per person or $100 per FTE? Because then you have the impact of full-time versus part-time.
Yeah, I would do it.
Benefits, et cetera. It's.
You would, in other words, everyone that works.
Right. FTE.
It's something we'd have to go calculate.
Okay. The other question I have off the bat, just looking, is I understand that we've got a new approach to the CIP. I'll look at that offline. On the proposed career and tech education comprehensive plans, I like we're doing more with that. I guess the question, so if I understand, the black text is the existing programs, and the blue text are proposed new programs. It looks like every school except for Brentsville, Potomac, and Osborne Park has blue text. Have we thought about what we're going to get, how we're going to get some blue text for them in the next few years?
Okay. So we have a 3-year plan. I may need Ms. Goss's assistance on this, but we have a 3-year plan that was created by Doug Wright and his team with teacher input, and this is year 1 of that rollout. So this does not show year 2 or year 3. So we can get that information and provide it to you. Did you have anything else you would add, Rita?
So you were looking at those 3 high schools.
Right.
So, Mr. Trenum, this, like Dr. Waltz said, we spent a significant amount of time working with the principals at those schools, but also looking at industry, what the industry needs are, and also looking at space at buildings. So there's a number of factors that went in to that. So you can see several years out on this plan.
Oh, can you?
In the
Okay,
blue-
I misread that then.
In the blue.
I see, yes, you're right, I apologize.
Text.
I was only looking at the middle school.
No, yeah, I was looking at that.
And so I can certainly, get you the specific reasons why we didn't expand into those schools just yet, but we considered what's already there in servicing students, as well as looking at places where we had a need to add additional programming. So it was a really comprehensive review that took place in order to put this together, but I can certainly go back and get you some specifics regarding those three high schools. I think you said Brentsville, Potomac,
And Osborne Park.
and Osborne Park. Sure,
The ones without blue on here.
absolutely.
So I can speculate at least on Osborne Park. You may recall when we did the Colgan boundaries, there was a huge concern about somehow that was going to devastate the Osborne Park program, and there was a tremendous amount of concern that year that those boundaries were redrawn. My guess on that program is because we are overcrowded at OP. The principal there, we have a quasi pre-governor's school for freshmen and sophomore to help them get their science and mathematics courses in line, and the transfers into there are such that we are almost to the point of closing to transfers. There's so many students at OP.
Yeah, and it's all transfer, I mean, it's not all transfers, obviously, but
It's a large numbers.
It's a huge number of transfers.
But we'll get back to you. We'll get with Mr. Wright and.
So, I think that's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you.
So I'm just wondering, I know I brought it up at the last session, I know you said it was in the executive summary, and forgive me because I honestly had not had a chance to look about whether or not we're going to be able to have the ability to fund the ombudsman position for additional, like a assistant, as well as startup costs like advertising and things of that nature. I know initially it was just, the slot was just funded for the position itself, so I didn't know if we were going to be able to update that or not.
So when we get to markup, that is one of the items that is on the list. So yes, we will be addressing that at markup.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilk?
Going back to the CTE thing, like Mr. Trenum mentioned in the comprehensive plan, space is definitely a major concern because I do know I was really trying to work out that partnership at Potomac to have the electrical program, but there is no more space. The option was to take away the weight room, which would have been lovely, and lose that program. But I was under the impression that electrical program we were going to put to Osborne Park, but now I see it Garfield, which again, I don't care. I'm happy it goes somewhere. But is that the same program? Did we make the decision to move it to Garfield versus Osborne Park?
That's my understanding. I don't know if do you have any information, or Rita? Yes, it is the reason.
Okay.
Yes, it is the program.
Oh, okay. So it's just going to Garfield. Okay, good job, Diane. There, that's cool.
Ms. Williams?
I just had a question that doesn't have to be answered tonight, but have we taken advantage of any of the information that we've learned from conducting that pay study and incorporating it into what we do budgetarily, and not right now, do I need examples, but maybe you could provide us with a few examples of how we're using that information to benefit us?
Yes, so this has been the first year that we've had the money to comprehensively address some of the findings in that. So there are several hundred reclassifications of employees as a result of that study. So just to give you, and there are additional positions as well. So just to give you one example, at the high school level, I believe it's attendance. The one we talked about today at the meeting. It wasn't office assistants. There was one more for each person. Registrar. So there's an additional registrar at each of the high schools. So that's one example. We have continuing issues with, so I'll give you a totally, that's a classified example. I'll give you an administrative example. So we have constant challenges with hiring principals. So the study recommended increasing the grade of the principals. So the elementary, middle, and high school principals' salaries are each improved by one grade. Or it was the grade, yes.
That's correct, one grade.
They each moved up one grade. So, you know, that's an example of, I want to say, 125 of the, I would say between 4 and, do we have the number of how many people are being reclassed, or went through the comp study and that are actually being reclassified? I want to say it's 400 and some.
The number of employees who are being reclassified is between 450 and 475. It's a very large number this year. Across, I forget, probably about 20 or 30 different position categories. So it's substantial.
Thank you for that, and not at this time, because you couldn't possibly have anything more to do, but maybe later we could get an update to the board at a later meeting of how, that study has impacted or improved our division, and then along that lines, I know that we did the special education audit and study, and I was just wondering, again, don't need an update this evening, but, how that has had budgetary impacts, because I think it's good that the public understands that when we do these studies and we spend this money, that it has a positive impact on our school division, and maybe some way to provide them with that information as well.
Sure.
Because people see a study and they think $500,000, that's a lot of money, but it does pay off in the long run, so.
So I can answer the second question also. So on the special education study, I believe I will check with either Dr. Roper or Ms. Goss. That study, is that posted to our website? Yes, that's what I thought. So the public can go in there and they can actually look at the positions that were recommended. But essentially what we did with the special education study, we funded every position recommended in the study.
That's fantastic. And when I say update, let me be very clear in saying I'm looking for something along the lines of like easy translation for dummies, what it means, very high level, so that it's easy to digest, because I know it's very intricate how that information
Sure, we
makes an
could
impact
pull
on
out
our
the
budget.
staffing elements of the study
That would be
and
great.
put that together.
And not something I need right now, but I appreciate that. Thank
Sure,
you.
no problem.
So if I could, one or two statistics. There were 14 positions in that SPED study, in that audit, that were added, plus a couple of other items that were non-salary, for a total of about $1.8 to $1.9 million. About $1.8 to $1.9 million.
How much of, I'm sorry. Were you next? Okay. How much of that is reimbursed back to us from the federal government out of their program?
Excuse me, how much of the $1.8 million? None of that's reimbursed. That's money that we have to put back in. With one caveat, to the extent that it's Medicaid reimbursable, we
Okay.
do have Medicaid reimbursements, but I just don't have the answer to that question here. I don't know if any of it's Medicaid reimbursable or if all of it is. I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Dr. Waltz.
If I may just add one caveat on, I mentioned that all of the positions recommended in the special education study are funded. If you go to the recommendations pages of the study, which again is online, we're implementing every recommendation, not just the staffing.
Thank Ms. Williams.
I was also wondering if we could get an update on our free and reduced student lunch population. I'm looking to know the breakdown by high school, elementary, and middle. and where we stand currently, like countywide.
Yes, we have that.
Okay. Anybody else? Ms. Satterwhite?
Okay. This is one question you'll probably have to get back to me on, but what would be the impact if we were to lower the maximum class size by one at the elementary and middle school at every level?
We can get back to you on that. I remember at one point in time, to lower it by one across every grade level in the school division, it was going to be $6 million. But that's a few years back.
It was $15 million across the entire school division at all grade levels.
Where am I getting the $6 million? See, that's why I shouldn't
Were
get
you
this.
asking for specific grade levels or the?
Elementary and middle school. I know elementary, we had it divided by, I want to say K3 and then 4,
Right.
5 for our caps for.
This is going to take a little bit more. I mean, there isn't a real quick answer. The other one is what are the space implications of also making that essentially class size reduction? We can take it as a budget question.
Okay, thank you. And, okay, this is a question that came from our budget committee. Someone wanted to know what our current fourth grade size looked like in light of a blizzard that happened in 2010. Are we seeing a huge increase in the fourth grade size for planning purposes? I was asked to ask the question.
Well, I mean,
Hey, it's down on my list. It's a
well,
legitimate question for planning purposes.
So, you know, that brings up a really good point. So, I mean, she brings it up in a funny context, but my understanding is during the recession, 2008, 9, 10, there was a significant decrease in the birth rate, and that's catching up to us now. So we expect, at least at the university level, less students applying. Could that be one of the reasons why our jump in student enrollment isn't as large as we expected? Mr. Klein, maybe you can answer that. Is that one of the demographic trends? Or does anyone know the trends on that? Because for planning purposes, I mean, Ms. Hadaway brings up a really good point in a.
Mr. David Beavers.
Thank you, Dr. Waltz, Chairman Lateef, members of the school board. The size of our cohorts are doing interesting things now. Our kindergarten cohort was the smallest that we've had in a number of years. And that's going to affect us for 12 years. So it's definitely impactful. The elementary, our enrollment at elementary level dropped for the first time in a couple decades. So there are waves coming through that, just like you're seeing at the university level.
Ms. Satterwhite.
Thank you.
We may have the answer to the fourth grade. We're checking.
Our
Okay,
fourth grade
thank you.
cohort is 6,913 students.
6,900 and,
How's
okay.
that compared to?
What's fifth and third?
Okay, fifth grade is 6,928, so it's a little bit larger. But when we go to third grade, it's 6,701. So about 212 students less. Then when we go back to second grade, 6,623, 6,691, and then 6,254.
Ms.
Okay.
Satterwhite.
Yes, for background, my mother was a childbirth educator,
Yeah,
so
I
I learned how to think about those things. Let's see, looking at. Okay. Oh, tech labs. It was on the big list that we have, were the tech labs for Cedar Point and River Oaks. And it was listed for tech labs at 2 full-time employees and supplies, and the total listed on our big double sheet. The total listed was $201,000, $201,860. How much are we looking at for the full-time employees with that, and how much for the supplies? Does anybody have a division on that?
Well, the largest part is always salary, and a lot of times people don't think about the fact that when we talk about employees, it's the salary and the benefits on top of that. And then we use an average salary factor to figure that out. So the majority is going to be salary and benefits.
Okay. And then,
You have it,
when it
Judy.
comes to professional development, we've heard this talked about a little bit. What is the division-wide professional learning plan? I haven't heard a definition of what we're looking at with that, because there's some money being put aside for that. What are we looking at?
Let's go back and finish up, tie up, Ms.
So-
Satterwhite, your previous question first.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I could, the salary associated, there's like you said, a position in each. The salary for those two teachers is $65,000 apiece.
Okay,
Is that benefits?
That does not include benefits. The fringe burden on top of that's about 39%. I could do the math real quick here for
no,
you.
that's fine. That gives a good estimate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so to your second question, we have a comprehensive division-wide professional development plan. Again, I'll ask Ms. Goss, I'm not sure if that is posted on the intranet, but we'll.
So good evening again. We do have a comprehensive professional development plan, professional learning plan. We developed that through a needs assessment with our employees. We worked with stakeholders groups and got their input. We looked at division student learning data, as well as our strategic plan to determine over a 5-year period what were those key pieces of professional learning that we needed to provide to all of our employees, not just the employees in classrooms, but all of our employees across the division. Everything from culturally responsive instruction, but also we looked at instructional components such as professional learning communities and other pieces to help us in the classroom. But professional learning communities and the concepts around that also relates to other employee groups, looking at data in all departments and how we would do that. So our plan is structured out for 5 years. It involves both in-house learning as well as hiring outside consultants and sending folks to conferences. And so that plan has been laid out and is available to employees on the internet, and they can certainly take a look at that, so that's available for folks to look at.
And there's also a significant online component of professional development. So there's, as every year rolls forward, there are many, many more opportunities to do this online, which a lot of employees love because many of these things they can do right in the comfort of their own home or classroom.
So the professional learning is offered in a number of ways. In person, like Dr. Waltz said, over the internet.
I don't know if this fits in on what you're talking about, but what about language difficulties that a lot of our students have, and we don't have teachers that can at least maybe communicate well enough?
So working with our English language learners continues to be a place where we're focusing on in the school division. We continue to have that as a part of our professional learning plan for all of our educators. And we still are requiring the same professional learning that we have in order to ensure that all of our teachers are prepared to teach English language learning.
Is this a costly program? Does it become costly to us?
Everything has a cost.
Oh, please.
And
Well-
so all of this
That's right.
professional learning is, there is a cost associated with the personnel that we hire to deliver that.
Yeah.
As well as any of those fees that we are paying for outside consultants to come in or sending folks to conferences.
Okay.
They get
Because I
45
just don't know
45 hours.
Okay, so I'd like to weigh on this as well. So one of the things that happened as a result of the Justice Department
Yeah.
involvement was a requirement to provide professional development to all teachers. So no matter what subject area you taught, we have put that we put that in place, and that has now been ongoing. You may remember 2 years ago, we received a letter from the state school superintendent. Our district had the largest increase in the scores of second language learners.
Right.
And that was at least in part, Ms. Sodke was the director at the time. She's since retired about a year or so ago. But that had a direct correlation to the jump that we had in the scores of the second language learners. And we are continuing that, even though we have basically come to a close with the Justice Department.
Oh, wow. Okay, thanks.
Professional learning plan, I'm sorry, I thought I pushed it. It had the division-wide professional learning plan mentioned on this sheet with an increase of $519,702. So is most of that the cost associated, because there's not a full-time employee listed with this?
That's correct. We, most of that is the costs for all of that professional learning that we were just talking about.
One other thing that I would just bring to the board's attention is having professional development for every employee in the school division is part of the board-adopted strategic plan. And I will just say that at least when I arrived, there were thousands of employees that went year after year without any kind of professional development opportunities unless they self-selected to do some.
Last one for tonight. Over to the CIP handouts. The one we had before was one that included the trailer reduction plan. The new one, I guess, it doesn't reshuffle anything, it just deletes those pieces associated with that, correct?
Correct, that was the presentation we had earlier.
Okay.
We would attach a separate page to that one that would identify that while not built into the CIP, that the total amount of the I can show it to you.
Yeah, maybe.
That-
Right.
We would show that summary to say that that's the amount that we would want to discuss with the Board of County Supervisors relative to how that might be funded,
Okay. The
rather
question I
than leave
have-
the assumption at the moment that it's built into our CIP and fully funded.
Right. Okay, the question I have is, I know our regular CIP was bringing the number of trailers down anyway. We were pushing on that, being aggressive on that. What's the difference in the number of trailers approximately we reduced between the two, with and without the?
Between about 100 and 125 trailers potentially could be eliminated as a function of the 174 million.
Okay.
Between 100 and 125. Keeping in mind that it depends on what happens with boundaries, it depends on what happens with program capacity, et cetera.
So that means the one without that probably gets us around 75 to 100. Is that reasonable?
It would probably take us down to about the 100 level, I think would be.
Okay. From 200, so that's about half. Okay.
Two questions not to be answered tonight. One, do we know the impact financially or the difference, I should say, how it affects schools? Like elementary schools does it have Title I designations? Middle schools and high schools do not. Have we ever looked at what the advantages to being in Title I school, like how that impacts them budgetarily? Because we know that students don't have any control over their finances, and since there's no designation for middle or high schools, how does that impact us when we look at our budgets and what that difference makes? And you don't have to answer this tonight. And then my second question is, and I know I should know, but I don't, and again, to be emailed, when are we looking at replacements for athletic fields outside for Fred and Lynn and Ripon? Thank you.
You know I had something else. Shuffling of papers that gave it away, I had something else. Okay, So we were talking about the elementary physical education teachers, and Dr. Waltz, I know respectfully, I know that you mentioned looking at a study. I'd like for us to consider, I'm going to pass these around, if you can each take one and pass it around and pass them down to the end. I'd like for us to look and see if we could consider phasing something in. Now, one thing that's not considered in here, we do have a lot of teacher assistants right now. And the question would be, how do we handle teacher assistants? But one sheet has a list of the elementary schools with the approximate number of students enrolled at each school. And then the other sheet, the spreadsheet that I did, breaks it down. Elementary schools with 800 plus students, 700, 799, and so on down. And then I broke it out by year. Say year one, we take the 24 schools that have 700 plus students in the elementary schools. And this is based on an average of $54,000 a year. I looked at our salary chart and I picked something. I just picked something, just to give us an idea. Could we phase in adding a second PE teacher at the elementary schools? In effect, this is an effort at class size reduction in a way. It's reducing the ratio of students to teachers. As I've heard about this, I'm concerned about the safety aspects. When we're looking at 50 plus elementary school students with one PE teacher and one teacher assistant, that's a lot of students in a room for a very active classroom. There are a lot of different needs with that kind of group, and for one teacher to be differentiating instruction with that large of a group, I'm concerned. And so if we can possibly look at addressing this year, I'd like to. And then I was also thinking, as we're looking at it, our schools where we have 850 to 900 students, we should not only be adding a second teacher, I think we should consider having a TA who floats between those two classes also. It just makes sense when we have that huge volume of students that those teacher right now is responsible for grading. Now, we had the supplements that we gave to the middle school and high school teachers. And one thing we might consider for smaller elementary schools, we might consider offering a supplement versus a second teacher. We might ask those PE teachers, do you want to do a supplement or do you want to have a second teacher? And then still have the aide if they choose to take the supplement. But I just feel like, especially the larger schools, I feel like we need to start something. I think it just makes sense. And I'd just like for the board and for you, Dr. Waltz, to consider this. I know we're looking at cuts, but based on the General Assembly, but with a budget that has so much money in it, I'd like to see us focusing on our students in any way we can possibly. So just wanted to put this out there as an idea to the board, and I know you're working on it. I know we're talking about it, but I just want to put this out there tonight and wanted to do it before we had markup and ask you to please consider it before we have markup next week.
So each and every one of those ideas that you mentioned, we've already met today about it, and each and every one of those ideas will be considered.
I do like it we're on the same page.
Pardon me?
I do like it when we're on the same page.
So part of, there's a lot of nuances, and not that we need to go into the detail of it tonight, but one thing I'm very, very concerned about is there are PE teachers with assistants that have been together for years that absolutely love the way their situation is working. Again, I usually don't do this, but I will just have to say my daughter was a product of one of those phenomenal situations where it, worked great. And I'm not suggesting that it does in every place, but yes, we're going to look at all of those things. We also have to keep in mind that whole thing around the competition of the competing resources. I mean, we have principals at the elementary level who are saying, look, what I need the most is a math resource teacher. So again, I'm not trying to pigeonhole this thing or make it oversimplified, but we will definitely look at all of those things. The other thing I'm extremely concerned about is I want to make sure that those teaching assistants, don't feel like they're now somehow discredited, dishonored.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I pride myself is talking about how important and valued each and every person in this school division is. So we've got all those things in the hopper.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. So, as always, if there's any other questions or concerns from board members to staff or administration regarding the budget, please, forward those on. Our last work session markup is next Wednesday, 6 o'clock here. We'll make sure the room is warmer, and that's it. Dr. Waltz?
I just want to remind the board that we would absolutely not be in the position financially to have what occurred at markup last year repeated, which is a surprise of $3.8 million of ongoing expenses that we knew nothing about announced that night. We cannot do that. So we're going to have a hard enough time dealing with the $3 million and then some of these other things that you're interested in. We're going to do our best to try to make that all work, but I would just like to appeal, if there's anything else somebody's thinking about, it would help us to know what those were tonight.
Great. So I appreciate the efficiency the board members have shown in bringing their questions to these last work sessions. And if there is anything that comes up either now, please bring them up. If not, you can email, but we don't want to go through a big drama next Wednesday. We'd like to have this tied up because we will be voting on the budget the next board meeting, March 20th, and then it goes to the County Board of Supervisors April 2nd. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.